Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Welcome back, everybody, for another great episode of the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough, and I hope you can follow us online at www.rockstarcfos.com. Great guest today. She's been a member of the CFO Leadership Council for some time. Janice Stucke is the CFO and Foundation Treasurer for Crew Network, a global association for women in commercial real estate. Janice, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. It's been a while since we've been planning it, so I'm glad we were able to finally pull this together. But I know you're relatively new to Crew Network, and we'll definitely explore that later. But for the moment, can you give folks the 10,000-foot view of your organization?
So Crew Network is a global association for women in commercial real estate. We have about 14,500 members in 13 different countries. So we're definitely an international group of women. And the mission of Crew is, although women dominate the real estate space, in commercial real estate, roughly 8% of representatives are women. So our mission is to grow that by supporting a global network of women in their career development and deal making, and help elevate them into higher level leadership roles within the industry.
It's only 8%?
Only 8%.
Gosh, it's interesting, but for anytime you hear a number like that in any profession these days, that is only 8%, but it just hasn't been my own experience either, though. I mean, it hasn't been even. So that's interesting. So I think that's great that you've got such a very important mission. And we'll absolutely get back to that a little bit. But before we do, I always like to talk about the early years for our guests. And can you share with us where you grew up? And
Sure. So I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. My parents owned restaurants and bars around the VCU area. So I had a very interesting upbringing, learned a lot about business in the early years. And my whole mission in middle and high school was to move to Japan and speak fluent Japanese. So
wow.
Had absolutely no thoughts of finance or accounting. My whole goal was to get abroad, and that really is what shaped me in the early years and was my main focus. So I was learning about business, but clearly not focused on it at that time.
Well, it's interesting because I've noticed that, kids from restaurant families, they bring two things. They bring an incredible work ethic because, people who don't own restaurants don't realize quite how hard it is. And they also bring a passion for whatever it is that they end up doing in their career. And, I think that's probably fair to categorize you. Is both of those things?
Definitely. When I was younger, it felt like we were forced to be there. I definitely not sure I valued the lessons I was learning. But really, I feel like everything I needed to know about business, I learned in the restaurant. This was in the 80s. So there was a cash register and there was the tape, and we really had to count inventory by hand and manage margins. And like you said, the restaurant industry has a huge focus on margins, and they're very tight, and cash management is key, and labor management. So I learned all that, in middle and high school, and saw the effects of that on our own family. So everything after that was just extra information. I kind of had gotten the gist of it in my formative years.
There you go. Did you have brothers and sisters, and did they also work at the restaurant?
I have a brother and a sister. We were all there. We went there after school. We definitely knew the customers. I knew the menu inside and out. So definitely, the restaurant was part of our family, and I spent a significant portion of my time there and helping out as well. I did a lot of the reconciliations of the cash register, and was quite good at it. So yeah, if you can do that down to when we used to have to count change, I know those days are kind of gone, but I definitely learned a lot about accounting and finance in that time.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned that when you were young, you wanted to live in Japan. And did that ever work out for you?
It did. So I spent 15 years studying Japanese. I went to half of my college years. I went to Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto. Actually worked for the Japanese Trade Bureau after that. So yes, it did come true. I did get to live abroad and learned a lot about international business that way, which was also hugely helpful. And having to do business in another language, it's also a very formative set of lessons about communication and just cultural aspects and just understanding how, everything is not US centric was also very helpful.
Well, I grew up in Massachusetts, and my dream was to live in New Hampshire. So I was less ambitious than you in that sense, and by golly, I made my dream come true as well. So, but no, that's fantastic. So I have to think just the opportunity of living in a foreign country, which not a lot of Americans do that. That must shape your business philosophy today, just what you've learned and just appreciation for such a different culture.
Definitely, it has. I also worked with refugees and spent a number of years in East Africa. So when you're abroad, understanding how the banking regulations and the banking system works differently, understanding business regulations differently, just as they impact your day-to-day life, logistics, you just have a much broader perspective on what the options are in problem solving. And I think that international perspective definitely sharpened my problem solving skills. And I think also my soft skills, now called power skills, just how to communicate and communicate a message effectively and bring people in. I mean, sometimes I didn't have the right words, but it's all about like energy and expression and enthusiasm. And I think that's been key to my transition into finance and growth.
Yeah, it's interesting you reference soft skills, and I think for a lot of CFOs, those are actually the hard skills, right? I mean, I'm probably typical of a lot of CFOs by my educational background, CPA, MBA, right? So the finance, the accounting, the quantitative stuff, that's it's pretty intuitive to somebody like me. But it's the empathy, the leadership, the team building. Those are the areas that I really struggled with, and even to this day, and I've been working 4 decades. I'm probably pretty good at it, but it's not exactly natural to me even after all this time. But I'm guessing you sort of have the inverse skill set in some level.
Yeah, I definitely started off more in the hard skills, power skills, whatever we want to call them. And in my 30s, I went back to school and got my CPA. So it was the inverse, although my undergrad, I did economics, so I had some sort of touch points. But yeah, it was definitely, I think, the team building and the how to manage systems and manage programs, and then I just added on kind of the finance and accounting skills, which really probably have just been the tangential piece of my success rather than the core of it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I did notice you have a master's degree in international affairs and public policy, as most CFOs do. So, so
Definitely, I'm a non-traditional accountant. In my 20s, I never dreamed of going into finance and accounting. It was not, I wanted to be abroad. I wanted to focus in international development. But it was once I was there, seeing on the ground, like, you can't help people without resources and funds behind it. And I wanted to go back to figure out how to manage the resources and funds better. So, I really see finance and accounting as really the greatest pivot to helping people and humanitarian aid and helping individuals in the world. Resource management is key to everything. And I think, a lot of people don't think about accounting and finance as being so humanitarianly focused, but it is. And even for me now at Crew, like having a strong company that pays employees well with good benefits, that's a mission and a focus to help. For me, I see that as helping make the world a better place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel the same way about my company and all the companies I worked for the most part. So that's great. So you went back, as not the college students, not adults, but, it's a little bit older than conventional and develop your accounting background, became a CPA. But tell us a little about your career path since that moment. I know you worked for a couple of tech companies out of the gate.
So I started off in tech. I had done international trade, legal things early, out of college with the Japan focused. And people I knew from once I decided to go back to school, they asked me to come over and work for their company. So I started off in a legal tech company. I knew the legal space well, definitely strengthened my accounting skills. And then I went over to a sampling company tech company that has since grown. So both of those had investors, VC, PE, and really had to sharpen my skills at both companies in the finance and accounting side. But that's where I did my first ERP implementation. And so that's really where I started to really gain savvy in implementing new systems and the change management and process management behind it, which really kind of became my niche starting there.
No, that makes sense. So you work for a couple of tech companies, and then you were the finance director at SHRM, which for those who don't know, and I might be off on this, Society for Human Resource Management.
That's it.
And that was your first foray into nonprofit from the finance and accounting perspective. So what was that transition like to go to a, company that good company, but it was a for-profit to one that is kind of more mission centric?
I think that there's a lot of people don't realize, and I say all the time, the not-for-profit space is often just a tax status. Like we still have to focus on profit and margin and, run a business. So it's the same business principles from the tech side that I applied at SHRM, and I was there during COVID. So, we were obviously in a big pivot on how to replace revenue, and we're looking at several investments and, all the things that I was doing on the tech side. There wasn't that big a shift, honestly, because it's just the same business principles. It's just what you're doing with the margin at the bottom, which typically is reinvesting it back in the business as opposed to going to dividends.
Yeah, it makes sense. And a friend of mine, he spent most of his professional life in the for-profit world, and then he became a CFO of a food bank. And he said, but it's just the exact same issues. It's distribution, it's inventory management, it's all of the things. He said the only difference is just legally it's incorporated as a non-for-profit, and it is a little bit more mission centric perhaps, but the fundamental business is not as different as he would have thought before he did that. So
yeah, definitely not at all. And, if you have donations or grants or, memberships, you're accountable to those people. You're spending their dollars essentially, So just as investors want to have insight on where those funds go, so do people that are giving you their money. They want to have insight on how you're spending those funds as well. So you're still accountable on both sides for sure.
yeah, that makes sense. So I want to chat a little about you. You've had this great path. Oh, actually, why don't we talk a little bit? You had one other company before the current role, which is Achieving the Dream. And maybe you can tell us a little about that organization's mission and what your role there was.
So I was fortunate after SHRM that I was able to become CFO at Achieving the Dream. Achieving the Dream focused on bettering community colleges throughout the United States. So definitely a great mission. And I did not realize that any sort of graduation or receiving any sort of certificate from a community college is pretty low. It's in 30%. So the focus is bettering the system. So there's a higher level of graduation or receiving some sort of credential to help better individuals that enter those systems. So it was a not-for-profit, but was essentially a consulting model. So we went in and did consulting at the community colleges. And I really focused on, I did a full-scale digital transformation there. So really upgrading all of the accounting systems, which was a big transformational project and also key to my growth.
Yeah, no, that was your first CFO job, right?
My first CFO job, and I became a CFO at 39. So I'm a millennial. Definitely felt very kind of isolated being so young in that role when a lot of the peer organizations, individuals were much older. So it was definitely like learning how to carve out space for me and find that network of people and mentors to help guide me. Grateful I reached the role young, but definitely, I needed a lot of support and advice from the outside, which was kind of how I ended up at the CFO Leadership Council, in order to get that support.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you said, you shared with me in the past that mentors have, played a critical role in your career growth. There's some that when you look back, it's like, boy, they really stuck out. And, one thing I've learned, Janice, is that a lot of the mentors that I've had weren't even aware that I thought of them that way, right? They just thought we had a friendly relationship. They didn't realize I viewed them as a mentor, that I was sucking up knowledge. But when you look back, are there any critical people who made an impact on your professional journey?
Definitely. So 10 years ago, I have an amazing mentor. She's still my mentor, Joy Sistrunk with Premier Group. She heads an accounting firm in Maryland. But we met 10 years ago and I told her my story. I was trying to get my CPA license. And, since I'd never officially been an accountant, most people said, there's no way. You'll never pass the test. Like, this is crazy. Why even try? And I told her, and she said, no, I'm here to support you. Like, let's do this together. And she has stood by me over these 10 years. She supported me through the exams and through each role. And she has been just pivotal in my growth. And she's really taken the time out to, anytime I've had an issue, I call her and she always calls me back as soon as she can and is been the main source of support and making sure I'm able to grow. And we're great friends now. But yeah, I can't imagine this journey without her. And I can't thank her enough for having been there this past 10 years.
And
Kind of coming up in the corporate finance, you don't have another CFO mentor to mentor you when you're CFO. So she's been key to that.
yeah, and truthfully, that's why I started. It was the CFO Roundtable initially, but the organization that's now the CFO Leadership Council is, I was like you, I was sort of a youngish CFO, and there was no one I could really go to ask for help within the company. It's probably not a good thing to tell your boss or the board of directors that you don't really understand something. So I started the group and sort of instantly 100 mentors. But I know I'd love to understand your own philosophy on being a mentor. And I know you have an interesting story here, and I'm going to allow you to tell it, if I may.
Sure. So, being a non-traditional accountant, I felt very alone coming through that path of going back to school in my 30s and trying to enter the field. And so I've definitely opened myself up to men and women, who've been on that path. And I mentor quite a lot of individuals who are trying to make that pivot in their 30s and 40s for various reasons. So I have several groups that I've supported, whether they've been internal to the company. I still mentor anyone I've worked with. And also I've helped develop something called the Finance Sisterhood, which are those in a similar age bracket who are in finance in various levels, various size companies. But we have a WhatsApp group. We meet at conferences, and we really support each other on the journey of juggling family, the demands of being kind of in the sandwich generation of your own kids and your parents and trying to navigate ambitious career goals. And it's been amazing to be a part of so many different groups and helping support so many different people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the Finance Sisterhood, is that what the group is called? Yes, I've somehow never heard of that one. So is it a formal group, like you apply for membership, or is it more like a
Very
grassroots type
informal.
of thing? So
It's just people, we meet at conferences, we're kind of in the same space of life, and they just get added on the WhatsApp group. And, I have this issue at work, or I'm navigating this challenge in family life, and just having that support system. And we're all spread out across the country and some in Canada, so just to kind of have that ability to reach out and not be alone, I think is really key, especially for women who want to keep accelerating in their career and juggle all those different venues. It's not easy, and not everybody understands that exact place. So it's good to have each other.
oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, at one of our conferences, and you've been to our events, so you know that we have a large number of female members and attendees at the conferences. And I found out that there were groups of women who met at the conferences, and they're of course across all of our 30 or so chapters. And they actually formed a WhatsApp group, and they keep in touch with each other that way. And it just, with technology today, it's actually pretty easy to form a formidable network.
It really is. And I think that's the best part of conferences. Yes, there's the content, but I think so key to the conferences is it can be very isolating when you're, in the C-suite and you have to have all the decisions, and it's hard to be honest, like, oh, I'm really struggling right now when X, Y, and Z is due, so it's just really key to have those networks to champion you and kind of have to build that outside support. And I've definitely found that in the CFO Leadership Council as well.
Yeah, I always steal the quote from CFO Brew. They said that our event that set the world record for hugs at a financial conference. So there's probably no official world record. Yeah, there's no world record that I know of, but if there were, I'm pretty confident he's right that we would have that. So, but I want to chat with a little about Crew Network. Sounds like a really exciting company and with a great mission. But how'd the opportunity present itself to you, and what was it about the opportunity that attracted you to the role?
So, I got a message from a recruiter on LinkedIn, and I happened to respond. What attracted me is it's a 35-year-old organization run by women. The entire board is women. Being a woman, it's just, we don't get a lot of opportunities to see women run organizations at every level. And so it's nice to be a part of a majority, all but one member on the executive team is a woman. We have a female CEO, an entire female board. It's just great to be surrounded by that vision, which we don't get often as women, and kind of be a part of building that network and being a part of that learning group, and kind of having that model of what female leadership looks like. There's not a lot of times you get that full scale view of women in leadership, and it's been instrumental and very wonderful to be a part of.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So you've been there 6 months, roughly?
I think we're in 8. So
Okay.
yeah, time
So
is flying.
yeah, it does go by pretty quickly. I remember the announcement on LinkedIn actually. But so, how has it lined up? What are sort of the ways you've been able to make an impact and put your own imprimatur on the financial leadership of the company?
So I was hired for my digital transformation skills. And so, I came in fast and furiously, and I've done that before. So I have a good vision on what that takes. Here we have significantly more entities than I've ever worked with. We have about 50 business entities, and some
Really?
of them are global. So it's a significant number of entities. So I haven't done an ERP like entire transformation with that many entities with the global scale. So that's had some nuance in it. But if you've done it once or twice, you kind of have that vision. Where things have gone that I wasn't expecting is really influencing the entire IT strategy of the company. We take the majority of our revenue on our website, and kind of pivoting towards multi-currency, and how that interplays with our online shopping cart experience. So definitely I've been able to strengthen my just global perspective on IT as well from the CFO seat, which has been a great learning experience, and also very drinking from a fire hose type experience as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And, a lot of times people come in, they take a new job, and, it's sort of the first 90 days or the first 100 days, whatever it might be, just sort of to understand the business and make an impact. Did you approach the role with that in mind?
I did approach the role with that in mind. I definitely was a listener, but I knew I needed to have to get started on the digital transformation. So at the end of the 90 days, we kind of started, which is pretty soon in a company to already make a decision on that pivot forward. But we got going. I think the learning curve has been in understanding all the different 50 entities. They're all doing something different. There's kind of the main entities, which I've had to learn, and I did a deep dive in quickly, but also meeting with staff to kind of get that bigger picture. And it's been a slower learning curve for some of the smaller entities, and I'm still catching up to speed on those.
Yeah. How many entities did you say you had?
50.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
quite a bit of entities. And I want to chat with you because it's not only a large number of entities, on a relative scale, but it's a truly global organization. So I can sort of see from their perspective, given some of the digital challenges you just described, and obviously your global vision for business. But tell us a little about sort of the global shift and what some of the operational challenges and opportunities were behind that.
So we have a pretty significant presence in Canada. It's over 10% of our membership. We're now also in Mexico and the UK. And so there was a discussion around, do we want to start accepting multi-currency in order to kind of make it more equitable for our global members, and there's a lot of views on that. But ultimately the board has made a decision to kind of make that more equitable, and the trickle down effects of that, it goes to finance, because we need to be able to manage that. And that has its own nuance. So that's been the learning curve I'm in the middle of, and making sure our operations can handle that shift.
And do you see like further global expansion, perhaps back even to Japan, but some other countries as in the future, or are you likely to be a North America based organization?
I think we'll always be heavily North America based just because that's where we started and we have the majority of our members. But we do get a lot of outreach from all over, places I never imagined that are interested in joining the network. And we do kind of have rules around that, and it is a process. But expansion will continue to happen. I think, like any other company, you have to be able to handle that expansion, right? The operations has to be able to back that up. And so we're kind of in that trying to get the operations to catch up with how quickly the network wants to expand right now. And that's kind of been my main focus and will be my main focus and role over the next several years.
That makes sense. And I'm curious, what are some, besides the global expansion, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that you're sort of looking forward to over the next couple of years? Say, the next 2 to 3 years.
I mean, I think the next 2 to 3 years, just getting the technology to back up that expansion. I mean, because it's not only the accounting systems and the multi-currency and that, it's the website and the interplay and all the legal ramifications. So definitely, as fast as we're growing, it's going to take me 2 to 3 years to really get the technology settled. And as we know, technology is never settled. So by the time I get things set up in one area, it's time for some major PCI overhaul or regulatory overhaul, it seems, or the privacy laws. Things are just always in flux, and it's just keeping up with all those changes all the time.
Yeah, there's an expression, just when I think I have all the answers, they change the questions. And it actually was said by a professional wrestler I recently found out, which is, geez, I've been quoting this pro wrestler all these years. But it sort of applies for CFOs in digital technology, right? You get it figured out and the cards are reshuffled.
And I think there used to be this, we do a big transformation, we'll run it for 5 years, we're going to get our ROI, and then we'll look to the next thing. And now that model is dead. You barely move 30% ahead and there's a new regulation or you need to upgrade or there's a new, it's just you're constantly like managing the system and upgrading the system. It's like that analogy, you're flying the plane and building it at the same time all the time. I think that's just the new normal. And with the new AI layer, that's making things interesting and more complex all the time. So, I know we're all focused on how to get ROI out of AI and how to layer that onto the systems. So there's new challenges that I'm excited about, but sometimes it's also very overwhelming, to think about all the details and nuance that goes into everything. So it's exciting and daunting all at the same time.
Yeah, and when I look back on what the profession must have been like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where there was none of this technology and there wasn't all this constant evolution and the constant learning that go with it, I can actually kind of see why accountants and financial people had sort of a negative stereotype to them, that we were kind of boring and uninteresting. But gosh, that's not really going to cut it today, right? So.
Not at all. I mean, no more are I come to work and open my spreadsheets and, plug into them and close them out and leave for the day. Those days are done, and every member has to be dynamic now. The change is happening all the time.
Absolutely. So I'd love to chat a little bit too about the team that you largely inherited with it. But what's your finance and accounting team like? And is it challenging to recruit, attract, retain, develop a team in a nonprofit environment? Because you get people who are mission focused. So, you're not exactly competing with, the Silicon Valley Titans. On the other hand, that's attractive to people who, think that they're going to get rich in 18 months. So.
Yeah, definitely not. That's not going to happen in the not-for-profit space. And even in the tech side, I've consistently inherited teams that are much older than myself. So they're closer to my mother's age than my age. So that has its own unique dynamics, and I think is traditionally not the norm, probably in the accounting and finance space. But in building a team, I always go with, and I've heard a lot in the finance conferences, radical transparency, and really focus on building those relationships, So a lot of the teams I inherit, they're not having regular meetings, kind of everyone's siloed and doing their piece of the puzzle to the close. But, I always come in, we do weekly meetings, we have team building activities, we try to, keep updates on people's personal lives as well, so really focused on bringing the whole person to work. You're not going to get rich at a not-for-profit, but people are really there because I think the personal relationships and that vision and wanting to be a part of that. And I really try to keep the radical transparency about where we are in building that vision and what everybody's role is. And sometimes we have to roll up our sleeves and do more, and it's the personal relationships that keeps that going.
That makes sense. An exception to that, although they reincorporated as a for-profit, the National Football League
Mm.
until recently, not the teams, of course, but the league itself was a nonprofit. And then it got out that the commissioner was actually higher paid than any players in the league. He made like $28 million one year. It's like, you're the CEO of a nonprofit making $28 million. How's that possible? So they're now a for-profit. But yeah, I certainly get your point. And, you're recruiting people who believe in and are passionate for the mission and, just kind of want to get a lot of stuff done.
They do, and I think it's also key too, like in not-for-profits, people want to see what's their pathway to growth as well, and I think trying to outline what that pathway is when there's not a lot of different roles or levels, but I think people want to grow and be able to see that growth. And I think that can be harder to map out in a not-for-profit, and that takes some nuance, so that people can see that trajectory ahead of them. And I really try to focus on that. Because it's important in the for-profit or the not-for-profit space.
So, yeah, absolutely. And I often ask this question of CFOs, and it's perhaps more interesting because you do work for a nonprofit, but you're a CPA, GAAP, it can do it really, really well. But what are some of the ways that you measure success at your company outside of traditional finance and accounting metrics? Like, what are your favorite KPIs that maybe aren't even finance and accounting related?
I mean, I think at every organization looking at turnover, one of the nice things about Crew is there's very limited turnover. A lot of our staff have been with the organization 10, 15, 20 years. So we want to keep that KPI strong to keep people happy working at Crew and have them have an entire career at Crew, and make sure we have the benefits to match. I think it's a traditional KPI, but we also focus on customer satisfaction a lot, just really staying in touch with our members and hearing what they have to say. And we really value that individual level feedback. And with the 50 entities, we work a lot with our local chapters. So I get a lot of one-on-one feedback from the local chapters. They write me directly. I take those calls, to get that individual level feedback, which isn't always the case. And that alone can keep me quite busy, just hearing what the chapters that we're working with on accounting and finance have to say and their ideas.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and that could be a full-time job, so it's juggling that sometimes with the day-to-day work, but just keeping that door open, I think that's key, and I think that's some added value I bring to the role.
Makes sense. And I want to chat a little about an important and underrated thing for CFOs and probably across the entire C-suite, but it's the issue of work-life balance. And how do you realistically achieve it in the current world? Because jobs tend to be all consuming. And as a former CFO, I know that the CFO role in particular is not one you can turn off your computer, walk out the door, and think that it's out of your mind right away. And you're also on, I have a list, you're on 73 different nonprofit boards. Not quite 73, but you're involved with the AICPA, you're the co-chair of our Baltimore chapter. You work with the Maryland Association of CPAs, and you're also on a coalition for adult English literacy. So you have a lot going on. How do you do it all, or do most of it all anyway?
Time management is key. And, something I've had to learn is, at one point I would work all hours all the time, but now I have to cut it off at a certain point, and that can be uncomfortable because I feel like, oh, there's things undone. But self-care is, I try to lead from self-care and mental wellness, and for me that's giving back. I want to give back to the profession that helped me get here, through the support of others. And in particular, I want to help women and people that are underrepresented see themselves as leaders. So, working with non-traditional accountants or people early in their career and saying, hey, do you see yourself as controller? Do you see yourself as CFO? Do you want to be director of finance? So really getting out there and being that support to help those individuals, envision themselves in higher roles. And like Joy did for me, saying, hey, I'm here for you. You can reach out, ask questions, I'll be there. And that's pivotal. That's as much me helping them as them helping me, to keep that real touch point to what's going on in the world and being that change that I want to see. I want to see a greater space for women and people of color to enter into finance and accounting and leadership roles, and really helping elevate them to get there.
Well, with more and more people like you as role models, I'm sure that it's going to happen. In fact, you may know, I did predict about a year ago, so I've only got 9 years to go, that I predicted that in 10 years, the CFO role would be majority female. And, there's a lot of factors that went into my belief in that. And I think it'll eventually happen, whether or not it's 10 years or not, I'm not sure. But, just the demographics are there. There's just more women entering the profession and staying in it. And just the nature of the way the roles change with its focus on collaboration and empathy and team building. These are just areas that women really can excel. So I see it as just it's a great profession for anyone. And I tell young people, yeah, go into finance and accounting. You'll always have a job, a lot of stability, high paying. But in particular, I do see it as a fantastic career option for women.
It is a fantastic career option. I make sure to promote it. I love what I do. I love being in finance. And I give back to those organizations because I want them to thrive. If we want to go to the conferences and we want them to be good conferences, we have to participate and help make them strong, and I feel like that's my role. There may come a point where I'm too busy where I can't, but while I can, I want to make sure to put my time and effort there. Just to keep the network strong and just so people have somewhere to reach out to.
That makes sense. And so I want to ask one thing when we talked about work-life balance. You left one thing out, but I'm going to put it right back in there. You've done a triathlon relatively recently, just a few weeks ago, right?
Yes. So I started this role and part of the interview process, I was very clear. I'm training for my first Ironman. An Ironman is 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of biking, and then finishes with a 26.2-mile marathon run. So it was an audacious goal. I didn't plan to switch jobs in the middle of that because just by itself, it was quite daunting to tackle my first full Ironman. And I was clear in the interview, also clear about all my board obligations and was hired anyway. So I'm really grateful that they saw the bigger picture of who I am as a CFO and wanted to support that. And crew was very supportive during my training, including the board, who tracked and cheered me on as a company and sent flowers afterwards with my accomplishment, but really gave me the space to be CFO on board and keep that goal. And I finished. So
yeah, so
it's amazing to cross that finish line with that trajectory behind me. It was one of the best top 5 moments of my life, I will definitely tell you.
Interesting. So were you like a good athlete when you were a kid, or is this just something you picked up as an adult and decided I'm going to make myself into a good athlete?
So I was always an athlete in middle and high school. I did cross country, running, softball, soccer. But, as I got into college, I focused on academics and career and living abroad. I always ran, but it was just, I'm someone that needs to jog for anxiety management, stress management, to get outside, just to have that mental health focus. So I've always kept it up, but it was really during COVID when my traditional routine of going for a job and lifting weights at the gym, the gym's closed and I had to figure out something else. And that's when I also got promoted to director of finance. And someone said, you ever thought about a triathlon? And I never had. I was never a good swimmer, but it just was like that right moment of like, okay, triathlon is outside. Like you can't go inside to work out. And so it just was right time, right place. And I really kind of needed to do that greater exercise level to help manage the stress of the growing role. And that's where I started in triathlon and really started to learn how to swim and swim competitively in open water. So it's been a journey and an exciting one. And I've met so many amazing people on both sides.
Yeah, there's 2 sports that I can't really relate to at all. And one is marathon running, just the concept of running 26.2 miles. It strikes me as absurd. The other is gymnastics. Like, it's not like I watch a lot of gymnastics, but I do during the Olympics and some other times. And those people don't even seem human to me. It's like I could train for the next 30 years. Of course, I'm 60 now, so I'd be 90. That would be a good excuse. But, if I dedicated my life, I don't think I could do some of those things. So, good for you for doing something very few people do. I did a different kind of triathlon a couple of years ago. I drank 6 beers, ate an entire cheese pizza, and watched 8 hours of football on a Sunday. So, yeah,
that sounds fun as well,
Yeah, it's not as accomplished as you, but, it's a bragging point for me. So, but I'm only half exaggerating on that, by the way. The beers, I don't really drink too much at this point in my life. But cool. So I want to get back to on the business side. So, you have a non-traditional background, which is great. But how do you see the nature of financial leadership itself changing, whether it be new technologies, new businesses, whatever it might be? Like, how do you see the CFO role evolving over the next several years?
I mean, I think we hear about it at every conference. I mean, really, the CFO role is kind of the jack of all trades. I mean, it's beyond even operations now. I mean, we have to know about HR, we have to know about IT, you have to understand contract negotiations, procurement, besides just the finance accounting, but also you start delving into strategy and legal. And, we just really have to have some knowledge of so many hats. And I know in the organizations I've been in, as new projects come on, they want my way in from that level of experience, as to whether we should move forward or not. So definitely, I mean, my time in finance and accounting, I've never been just stuck to the finance and accounting role. It's always been looking from this broader perspective, and I think that's only going to increase.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And my final question for you is, what's your advice for the next generation of CFOs?
I think coming into this field and as CFO, next year will be year 4 for me as CFO. So I'm at the beginning end of my CFO journey, and really it's such an exciting field because there's just so much opportunity. Roughly I have 20 more years to go, and it feels like the world's my oyster, and that's a great place to be. Kind of mid-career. But I tell every CFO, never give up. I think particularly people coming in this field, we know there's less mentorship. People are kind of getting into leadership roles with not a lot of mentorship or advisors. And, that's triathlon for me. Just reminding myself all the time, like, I'm brave, I'm courageous, I can tackle whatever's coming, and just really learning to never give up, really hone that gut instinct and dive in no matter what it is. And I think that's what's asked of all of us in this role. And will only increase as people are coming, up in their career with less and less mentorship and support in what that leadership role looks like. I think you really have to harness believing in yourself. And I think that can be challenging sometimes for people, men or women, and I hear it often from men. It seems like they're so confident, but we're all wavering and struggling, and just know you're not alone, and dive in and reach out to the association space for the support you need if you don't have it internally in the company. And it's possible. And I hope I'm a representation that it's possible. You can grow and move up.
I'm certain you are. I think that's great advice. So I want to take a moment just to thank you for being here. You've been a great guest, and I'm sure the listeners are going to get a lot of value from this. So thanks so much for your time, and look forward to continuing to follow your story.
Thanks, Jack. So happy to be here, and good luck, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.